to the 11th episode of the Music Mind Lab. Today I'm joined by Marta Lambert, who is the incredible Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Seattle Chamber Music Society. And I'm so lucky to have been able to meet her through the Academy for the past 2 years, and she's just such an amazing musician and leader and teacher, so I'm really excited to be able to talk with her today. So Marta, can you introduce yourself a little bit to us? Can you maybe talk about how you started with the viola and what that process was like?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Kayleen. This is such a cool idea for a podcast, and it's really amazing to just be invited and to represent SCMS. My name is Marta, as you mentioned. I am originally from Greenville, North Carolina, but traveled around a little bit in New York City and in New Haven, and moved to Seattle about 2 years ago to lead the education and community engagement programs at Seattle Chamber Music Society, where I had the wonderful opportunity to meet you. So I initially started actually as a pianist. Went to a senior recital of someone who you might actually know. Her name is Caroline Shaw. And Caroline and I grew up in Greenville, North Carolina together. And I went to her recital, her senior recital, and I was like, what are these beautiful sounds coming out of this string instrument? And so I started playing violin and played violin for about 12 years. And somewhere along there, I became really fascinated by the viola. I had oftentimes played an inner voice in string quartet settings, and I just really preferred the noodles and the textures and the harmonies, and I really loved being in that inside role. I always describe viola as being the peanut butter in a peanut butter sandwich because it's the yummiest part of the sandwich. And so viola was a really natural transition for me, picking up that instrument. And I really didn't start playing viola seriously until I was probably 17, but it was the best choice I ever made.
That is so cool, especially you mentioned that you started seriously actually committing to viola at age 17, which is absolutely insane considering just how amazing of a player you are. And I was wondering, since you did go to pursue music in university, so I was wondering what guided your decision to actually study music in college? And then once you did decide that, what was the preparation application process like for you?
So, being originally from Greenville, North Carolina, I was very lucky in a musical family that was very supportive of me going into music. And I initially went to a university called East Carolina University that has a really wonderful festival called the Four Seasons Chamber Music. Some of the first chamber concerts I ever went to. So I entered school at East Carolina University for my undergraduate studies and was initially a double major in viola performance and in education. I was an education major. I was a North Carolina teaching fellow. And it became very clear to me while I was doing the double major that really the only place I wanted to be was at the music school. And so I quickly shifted gears and in being music performance. And those 3 years at East Carolina University were some of the most crucial years of my life in terms of setting the foundation for my love for my instrument, but also especially for chamber music. And again, had very supportive teachers. Our Gregorian was one of them. Melissa Reardon, who's now in the Borromeo Quartet, were very supportive and encouraged me. So I applied to Juilliard and a few other schools, and that was probably one of the most eye-opening processes coming from a little town called Greenville going to New York City. The application process itself, I just hadn't had those kinds of experiences before, but you really learn what it means to work hard to create the best possible version of a recording that you can, while also, staying grounded in who you are. And, I really just can't help but circle back to the support that I had just helped me push through.
You mentioned earlier that it was a very big shock going from like your smaller hometown going all the way to NYC for Juilliard. And I was wondering, in addition to Juilliard being in the middle of the city, it also has a super high caliber of skill level, obviously, for all of its students and faculty. So I was wondering, in that kind of environment, did you ever feel like there was a lot of competition or pressure? And if so, how did you work through that?
Well, I think going from a small town to a big city has is just, there's so many factors that go into that. And I think in terms of going to a place like Juilliard, it's a very competitive place. I mean, people go there to become the best musicians. But at the same time, I was very lucky. I studied with Misha, Amory, and Huang, who showed so much compassion and really helped me with those initial shock waves of being in a new place, of being in a new school, kind of having to restart. You're confronted with a lot of really unique problems and challenges. So you really build a lot of character when you push yourself.
I was also wondering, going to Juilliard, what were some of the most valuable experiences or most impactful moments from your time there?
So, I mean, some of my closest friends who I'm still in touch with every day are people I met at Juilliard. My studio mates, I mean, my teachers, all of the musicians who I was able to have access to while I was at Juilliard is just incredible. Itzhak Perlman came in and conducted Tchaikovsky's Serenade one time, and it was this huge, massive reading and it was just so inspiring to be around him and to hear his stories and to be able to kind of soak up his musicianship. Really memorable performance performing at Carnegie Hall with Alan Gilbert, just really incredible repertoire. For my first time playing Heldenleben was at Carnegie Hall. Just really amazing opportunities with amazing musicians and amazing spaces with, as I mentioned, many of whom are now friends and colleagues.
Wow, it's so cool that you're saying that, and I feel like it also resonates really deeply with me because that's exactly how I've felt for the past 2 years at the Academy, just being in the same space as such incredible established professional musicians and also being grouped with my peers. It's just been such an inspiring process for me. And so kind of continuing this discussion about your education, I was wondering if we could spend a little bit of time talking about your doctorate degree at Juilliard. And specifically, I'm really interested in your dissertation, which is the viola as the voice of lamentation, the story behind the sound. And I feel like that's such an interesting topic, and I would really love to hear you talk about how you got the inspiration for it and what the process of working on it was like.
It's kind of a funny story. I went to a concert at Yale, the Brentano string quartet concert program of laments, and I love sad music, and I just love this sound world, and it just to me it has always been so viola, this sound world. That aside, I went to this concerts of laments because I just love them. A colleague of mine, his name is Gregory Lewis, he's a violinist in the Callisto Quartet, good friend. Like, hey, this would be a pretty cool dissertation. And as part of that dissertation, and just kind of an effort to contribute to the repertoire that I love so much, I actually collaborated with three really good friends of mine and commissioned a work myself. That is a lamentation when my friend Kevin Affat and I premiered it years ago in New York. Really fulfilling project, and just again, it's one of those, if you push yourself, it's one of those character building things. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
That is so cool. Wow, I feel so inspired listening to this. I was wondering, I know that you have a lot of prior experiences with youth education, even during your time in school, like the Morse Fellowship and also the Music in Schools program at Yale. And then I was wondering, is there any like specific story or encounter that you had during those experiences that kind of strengthened your decision to continue working in music education?
No, I do sort of, it's not really a story, it's more so just a fond memory. Incredible programs. I also worked at the Queen's Pre-College. I worked there for 7 or 8 years, and something that I took over halfway through working there was introductory orchestra. And so I was a conductor for an orchestra of really ambitious, energetic kids who were entering orchestra for the first time ever. So the age range was, or the starting age range was probably fourth or fifth grade. When I first started taking this over, I was terrified. I had never done anything like this before. It was just a very different kind of teaching for me, but it very quickly became one of the most favorite things that I ever did in New York City. And some of my fondest memories playing Star Wars, songs from The Lion King. We did an arrangement of the Magic Flute Overture, which was just the cutest thing I've ever seen. So there's so many sides to music. I went to Juilliard to get my DMA to write a dissertation, but really some of the things I looked forward to the most were being in that classroom at 8:15 every Saturday for 5 years with my fifth grade orchestra students.
That is so sweet. I would actually love to hear you talk a little bit more about the topic of how there's so many different sides to music. So, is there anything in particular that you want to talk more about that subject?
I would say that I started to conceptualize all the different sides of music at Seattle Chamber Music Society. When you're in school, you really learn and you really have a perspective for the side of music that is your focus of study. And it's just kind of how it is. And it's funny because I remember so many of my teachers, especially one named Mrs. Scott. She was my ear training teacher and my hero. She would always remind us to go to Central Park or go to the museum and go outside of the school, like take a break outside of the school. And I was like, oh, what I don't have time for that. You're in your 20s and you need to be soaking all of these different things up. And I just didn't really understand that at that time. But now that I've left school and going into this role at SCMS and the different facets of music that I'm witnessing and leading and all of these different elements to it, I really broadened my scope on what music can mean. We run these concerts called the Three Wishes Project, which is a really beautiful project at the University of Washington Hospital, where SCMS musicians play music for families who are sometimes in the last minutes of their life. And so it's a way for families to have a humanizing experience for music. It's beautiful. And so that side of music is just so important. And I think it's important for the families. It's also important for the musicians to remember why music is what it is. We also a wonderful string quartet in residence for Seattle Chamber Music Society. They participate in a really interesting project at the Memory Hub, and they're working with Sarah McKitty, who is exploring the intersections of music and memory for patients with dementia. And she is writing her thesis, her PhD on this. And these interactions with the string quartet are going to be folded into her dissertation. So they're, in a way, part of that experimentation process of how can music help? So yeah, lots of sides to music. There isn't just the dissertation side. There isn't just the, getting up on the stage and performing side. So there's so much to it.
Wow, yeah, this is so amazing to listen to because I am also very interested in music and neuroscience, and just to hear the amount of local impact that the Seattle Chamber Music Society is creating is so inspiring. And kind of building off of that, I was wondering, how did you get involved with the Seattle Chamber Music Society in the first place?
Yeah, so many years ago, about 10 years ago, when I was at University in North Carolina, I met someone named John Holloway, who is the current executive director at Seattle Chamber Music Society. And he reached out to me and asked if I would consider applying for this position. And I did. let me say that the interview process for this role was very challenging. It was sleepless nights, but it was worth it. And again, if you push yourself, you learn so much about yourself in the process.
I'm so glad that, you went through that interview process. I really can't imagine anyone else taking that position other than you, and I'm sure all of the other Academy students agree. And I was also wondering, since, in my experience being an Academy student, just going to the Academy every single week and meeting you, I've noticed you always have this giant smile on your face. You're always just such a source of positivity and just kindness for everyone. And I've heard this from so many other students as well. But beyond that positive attitude that you have, you mentioned there have been so many times where you've pushed yourself or where you've had to work really, really hard. So I was just wondering, when you encounter those, I guess, difficult spots, how do you push through that and make sure you still approach your work or your day with the same kind of positive and amazing attitude that you have?
Well, I think that having students like you in the Academy for Chamber Music really are inspiring to me. So I first just want to say that I think everyone encounters challenges. Everyone encounters things where you feel like you can't go on, but for me personally, I think that compartmentalizing is remembering what matters, remembering why you've made the choices you've made, remembering that this is all about music, which we love, really helps. And I guess on a more practical note, just remembering to have balance in your life is really important, which is what Miss Scott, my Juilliard ear training teacher, tried to insist early on. I think I really embraced the work hard, play hard kind of mentality where, that release for me is going out and running around Lake Union or playing my instrument for me and for no one else. Just finding what brings you joy to incorporate those things into your life on a daily basis.
That is a great piece of advice. And I was also wondering, do you have any other pieces of advice for students that might be interested in pursuing music or pursuing music education?
I think I'll draw from my own experience. There's this one amazing quote from Harry Potter. It's I think Dumbledore says it to Harry, help is always there when you ask for it, kind of thing. And I think this kind of goes along similarly with your question, about how do you deal with challenges. When I look back my schooling, and even still now, we're still all developing humans. I think the best thing you can do for yourself is ask for help and lean on your friends. And, if someone is having a bad day, send them a puppy video from Instagram because they'll do the same and it will bring you joy, lend a hand to your neighbor and you will receive the same. I really believe in that and have gotten through some of the most challenging things in my career because of my friends and because of my family. And as I'm, with how I started this interview, I was very fortunate, am still very fortunate, to have one of the most supportive families for my career. And so in that regard, asking them for help, leaning on them wasn't necessarily difficult. But I think if you're a hardworking individual and you have a lot of ambitions, asking for help can be hard. But I guess, for someone like you, Kayleen, what keeps you coming back to music every day?
My relationship with music, to be completely honest, I think what happened at summer camp was that it was the first time, this is kind of a weird way to put it, but it was the first time I really felt like a musician. if that makes sense. I think doing violin and piano before, I did not feel confident in my own abilities at all. So I think going to summer camp and then being surrounded, being friends with so many established and just incredible musicians, I kind of felt like for the first time, oh yeah, like I kind of am also making the same music as them. I'm also playing in these chamber groups with them. We're all learning and we're all doing these things together. And I think that community aspect is definitely one of the biggest things that keeps me going, which is why I love the academy so much. I just love it. And then also, I would say the second and most important thing would probably be like my very strong motivation for personal growth. Like, I just love going through challenges and then becoming a better person afterwards. I think, regardless of if it's mastering a certain technique on the violin or being able to focus for longer or being able to speak better on stage. I feel like these are all just like minuscule improvements that even though they might not be the most like applicable in this certain moment, like over time, like when I build up my character through these challenges, like I'll be able to apply them to like anything in the future. So I feel like that's a mindset that I really like to keep close to me, and that's why I continue taking on the challenge of music. I think that's why it's very gratifying for me. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Marta, for giving me the chance to talk about my own thoughts. We're now nearing the end of our time for this episode, so I was hoping we could transition to some closing thoughts. Are there any final pieces of advice or a final message that you'd like to share to everyone who's listening to this?
Go to as many concerts as you can because James Ennis is amazing.
Fully agree. Completely agree. Okay. Thank you so much, Marta. I genuinely, this was like such an enlightening episode for me. I feel so inspired and I had such a great time today and I learned so much. So thank you so much for spending your time with me. And also thank you so much everyone for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And please look forward to the next one, which will be released in 2 weeks.